Well, good morning, guys, and welcome to the show. New cabinets are in. It's pretty exciting. Don't have these done yet, but we're getting there. Anyways, welcome to the show, Fernando.
Welcome to the show.
Today we have a fun one for you. We have this blue thing behind me. Let's roll the intro and we'll take a look and see what it is. So this is a 2015 Nissan Xterra. He's got this thing decked out for crawling on those tough Florida rocks and stuff like that. It's all jacked with metal. Yeah, it looks cool, but we're not worried about that. We're putting a stereo in it. So let's hop inside and take a look what the factory has, and then we'll see what we're gonna replace it with. So in the dash, it has this cool factory touchscreen. Not so cool. Either way, it's the Rockford Fosgate system. That means somewhere in here there's gonna be an amplifier and the factory subwoofer. We also have a set of speakers up in the dash here. Speaker in the lower part of the door. Speaker in the back door. And then back here in the cargo area, normally there'd be a subwoofer here or here in most cars, but not in this guy. No, this guy, that subwoofer is located right here up underneath the driver's front seat. Now this dash is probably one of my least favorite dashes. It's simple enough to get out, the top piece pops out, and we'll show you that in a second. But Nissan has never been known for making like solid plastic. We've been fortunate that the current version of this, or this newer version, has been a little better, but it's still extremely scary to get this dash out. I absolutely hate it, and to be honest with you, it's the one thing about this car that just scares the crap out of me. We're gonna do that first, because it needs to just get off my plate. Let's see what's going in it though. The screen is gonna be replaced by the DNX 1007 XR. It's getting a set of the KFC X174s for the rear, set of KFC XP6902Cs for the front. That'll be a 2.5 in the dash and a 6x9 in the bottom door. And to power all that is gonna be the XR 901-5. And then for a subwoofer, I believe he's getting the Rockford something in a box with a grill. We'll take a look at that later. And then for integration, we're going to be using iData with their new Kenwood plug and an RR, and then the harness, USB, dash kit from Metra, and some Stinger wiring for all of that. Now, as I said, I really want to get that radio, factory radio, out of the dash. Oof, man. So let's hop in there and we'll do that first. For this, it starts with removing this top piece here. Their clips are on the right and left side, not across the front. Really thin panel tool is what you're gonna want to use. And just kind of work your way to get out some of the dirt that might be sticking this thing in place. All right, that piece is off. There's 3 screws in the top here, 1 in the center, and then 2 that hold the actual radio. They're all Phillips. Now is the fun part. There's 2 big plastic clips here, and there's a couple across the bottom. Just kind of wiggle and hope for the best. It's also nice to have a plastic pry tool for the thicker areas. Once you get those clips out, pull it as far forward as it will come. This is where a rag is very handy to put onto the bottom, because the bottom are metal clips and you kind of have to rest it down. You don't want them to scratch. Remove all the plugs from the back of the radio. There are quite a few of them. The airbag though, however, you're gonna wanna pull that out of the kit and plug that back in. Nissan is one of the few cars that when the airbag light is disconnected, it will trigger an airbag light in the dash. We always remove that, attach it. You will need a small Torx. Once I remove it, I put the screws back in so I don't lose them. Clip that back into place. Most dashes in cars these days just don't give us the room that we need in order to put in a modern radio. Smart harnesses, brain boxes, backup cameras, all the stuff that just goes behind a radio, RCAs, speaker wires. This dash is no different. However, this dash is actually pretty simple to modify to get what we need in here. There's this piece right here that just gets cut here and here and comes out. And some of the versions of the vehicle that have bigger, some of like the pickup trucks and stuff like that, this is already removed. For that, we like to use this little saw here. With that out of the way, it'll now give us room to get our new radio into place with all the accessories we have. The radio is attached to the back of this piece, which is kind of fun. Let's head over to the workbench and we'll take a look at the dash kit and how this guy comes apart. Prepping the factory dash can be, well, it can be fun and also a pain in the butt. A lot of cars nowadays are needing some form of a prep work, meaning pulling out pieces and repurposing things, because that's just the way the industry has gone, trying to replace a factory radio. Even something as old as this from 2015 needs a certain amount of work. On this particular radio, there is 4 Torx screws holding this metal bracket in that holds this radio. They are T20s. Anytime working on a dash, as much as you'd like to, don't use a cordless drill. And especially on a Nissan with this hard, brittle plastic, don't use a cordless drill. And that's it. We have the factory radio out. Subwoofer underneath the front seat. Honestly, it's not a bad idea for a factory system. They typically put tiny woofers in these things, and when you put it all the way in the back, like a little 6.5 or an 8-inch, think of old Tahoes. They eventually figured out, in the Tahoe specifically, to put it on the center console. In this case, the seat in these just sits like 10 inches off the floor. Not really, but a ton of room. But that means we have plenty of room for our amplifier, the Kenwood. First, we have to get this thing out though, and also figure out where the factory amplifier is. We still haven't done that yet. It may be down here. I doubt it. I don't remember. Let's get it out and figure it out. To do that, we have to remove the seat and a couple extra bolts. To get this seat out, there's 4 14mm bolts. 3 of them are covered, 1 of them is not. This guy here is not the covered one, which makes it easy to figure out it's a 14mm. They have little covers that cover up the bolts. The same panel tool that we use to get the radio out works great for getting this cover off. 14mm, they all come off. Now through the magic of video, I've already done that. Lifting the seat up, there's a 4-wire plug over here on the subwoofer, which is kind of depressing because that means the amplifier is somewhere else. Unplug that, 10s, we can get this thing out if I can remember where I put the drill. This comes out rather easily now. I think we'll be using the vacuum at this point because it looks like there's a Chick-fil-A bathroom in here. Well, not really Chick-fil-A bathroom because we all know they're super clean, but we'll just go with bathroom. Meet me over at the bench and we'll take a look at this thing. A lot of people that want bass always ask the same question. Can I just put a better woofer inside of here? And typically the answer is no. This is an 8.5 inch across. However, it is extremely shallow. And the woofer would have to be about less than 3 inches deep. Now sometimes, in this case, they put a bolt in the bottom of the woofer. This is also one of the reasons why, and that's so the box doesn't expand. They use this as part of the bracing system. It's pretty cool. This is a dual voice coil, and there again, this is typically something that you wouldn't want to replace. Now that isn't to say there aren't manufacturers out there, Focal, that make something that can't go underneath the seat on each side, JBL, that will give you a good bass response that will fit underneath each side, adding a small amplifier to them. But for this is where that Kenwood amplifier is going to go. So I just wanted to show it to you and kind of give you that idea of what you're looking at. Now it's time to go Easter egg hunting. We need to find the factory amplifier. Some of you guys are yelling at the screen right now telling me exactly where it's at. That's good and all. However, it wouldn't be this channel if we didn't kind of give you an idea of every car. So yes, this is a Nissan. However, each manufacturer has their little twist on how they do things. And it's very helpful if we take the time and kind of explain to you some places that you may want to look for a factory amplifier. And we'll kind of name them off. So like if you have a Dodge, the Dodge amplifier is typically in the driver's dash to the left of the steering column with all the plugs facing down. It's basically right above that emergency brake if it's there. And the bigger cars like the Ram, even though Ram is not a Dodge, it's a Ram, I get it, it's okay. That could be underneath the driver's front seat. And the older ones, like the old ones with the dash that cracks into a million pieces, those are actually above the glove box, and they're the bane of my existence. And the even older ones than that, they're actually attached to the speakers themselves in each door. That doesn't happen too much anymore because of water damage and stuff like that. And some of your Japanese cars, they've gotten creative. They'll put them in this kick panel area here on the passenger side, all the way up in the dash, sometimes down low in the dash. Dodge does that in like the Dakota too. Some of the other Japanese, like Honda, they like to put them all the way up here at the front of the center console. All the way. And the plugs will typically go out the driver's side, but they're way up in there and you don't usually pull them out. You can get to the plugs because they're facing into the footwell. Sometimes they're in the passenger side, but that's another great place. GM likes to put them up underneath their center console. So does Ford on some of the F-150s. If you got a Ford Premium Audio and you don't see the amplifier behind the back seat, they're underneath the center console, it's gonna suck. And the Toyotas, they like to put them underneath front seat in the bigger trucks. However, sometimes they'll put them behind the back plastic on the driver's side, where you have to pull the seat and pull this whole thing out, and then you'll find an amplifier back there. Your German cars, well, those are typically in the trunk. I mean, that's what they do. It's kind of nice. And then there's everybody else. And in the SUVs, it can get to be a lot of fun. Like in some of the Fords, they're off on this side. And in some of the other Fords, they're off on this side. Ford now, in like the Explorers and Expeditions, it's like there's a radio box over here and an amplifier over there, and it's like, come on guys, really? And in some of the new GMs with the big screens in the dash, the brain box, the radio itself, let alone the amplifiers, like screen in the dash, radio high up in the kick, where it's like you have to be a Cirque du Soleil acrobat to get it out. What that all means for us in this car, it may be underneath the back seat. It's not. But anyways, there's also that. Some of the Toyotas, they put them under the back seat. I guess the all in all, it really just means there's pretty much no specific place to find the factory amplifier. However, a good indicator of where the amplifier could be, like if it's in the back of the car as opposed to the front of the car, is the floor sills. There's a lot of wires that are gonna have to go somewhere, meaning that subwire, the driver's door, the driver's dash, that's 8 wires just for the speakers. If it's in the driver's rear door, it could be a coaxial or a single driver, it could be a separate. This one is a separate, so there could be 4 wires or 2 wires. In these running boards, this area right here could be a bunch of speaker wires. And that's an indicator of where these wires are coming from, back of the vehicle or the front of the vehicle. So it's a good place to start if you're just totally lost and you're looking at the back of the car and you're going, man, I don't want to pull this whole thing apart just to find out it's not there. Look in the floor sills first. So we're gonna go on the hunt, see if we can find the amplifier, because I've given you a lot of options. Why don't you guys guess where you think it is? If you know, don't comment, because let the other guys guess. Now in the mere seconds since we just talked, hopefully you guys paused this and wrote down where you think the amplifier is. But let's take a look. Now, taking my own advice, I always like to take easiest to hardest. Meaning someplace where I can just stick my head without pulling out a panel. Up into a kick panel, feeling up in the dash. Or, in this case, just simply looking underneath the passenger seat. Look at that boy, isn't that sexy? It's right there, boom, done. Now this changes everything. And this is why you take the car apart first before you start running wires. There's no reason for us to put the amplifier underneath the driver's seat. We can go right underneath the passenger seat and we have all our wiring right there that we're gonna need. The sad thing is I know they don't make a harness for this, but that doesn't mean we can't make one, which is probably what we're gonna do. I'm gonna unplug it, I'll meet you guys over on the bench, and we'll take a look at it. This is the factory amplifier, not that big. We're talking like 7.5 by 7.5, good square. It is fairly tall. It's like 2.5 inches tall. On the side here, these plugs, for those of you guys that aren't familiar with tons of plugs, which I totally understand, these are General Motors plugs. These are the same plugs that they use in pretty much every GM. This is a standard GM harness. This is a standard harness for amplified GM, so the likelihood of us finding an adapter for this is actually pretty high. More than likely, we're gonna have to repin it, but we'll address that in a little bit. It does come with this mounting bracket here, which gives us a nice flat area. We might want to retain that. We might not, it just kind of depends. This guy comes off and that gives us this bracket. Probably hammer this little elbow here down flat, and then we can make a bigger bracket that would hold our amplifier. We'll see, I don't know yet, I'm not sure, but that is an option. Let's hop back in the car and we'll see if I've managed to find a harness for this. So 5 minutes in front of a laptop yielded my answer as far as whether there's a harness or not. Now keep in mind, when I say harness, I don't necessarily mean wire for wire harness, I just mean something that's gonna plug in. That's the most important thing. Now as I said, this is a GM harness, even though it's in a Nissan. And Metra, you go to metraonline.com, makes this guy, the 70-2054. This guy right here. It's not a cheap harness for sure. As you can see, it comes with like a ton of wiring. It's made to go in the trunk of a General Motors car. I'm almost guaranteed that those wires aren't the same. So I know I have it, but do I need it? And that's the other thing. Because there's two harnesses there, and depending on what is on the smaller secondary harness, I might not actually need it. I might just need a regular old cheap GM harness. That means we have to do some testing. Now I could have done it the other way, but I just wanted to make sure we had it in stock in case I do need it, and I went over and grabbed it. Get some way to test the speaker. In this case, we're going to use a tone generator. Grabbing that big 8-pin harness here. Looking at it, I'm pretty sure a lot of these are power and whatnot, so we'll come back to that one, because if we can get all the speakers we need from this harness, then we don't have to even worry about that one. Typically, these harnesses are an over-under, not a side-by-side, meaning that if, you know, whatever's here is below it, side-by-side would be, you know, every two. The easiest way to figure that out is just do a little probing. It's this door here next to me. I'm gonna hop up and see if it's the dash also. Just the door? So that's good. That's the driver's door. Ooh, that's the driver's dash. Passenger dash. That's this side rear door. It has a tweeter, even though we're not gonna use it. I'm just gonna check and see if it's on. It is on, so those are connected. That's the other side. When the rest of these don't do anything, because that's all the speakers that are in the car. That means we are only going to need a cheap GM harness for this, which is great, because that takes the price down like tenfold. I'm gonna return that one, and meet me on the bench and I'll show you the harness we are actually going to need for this car to do the bypass. Best Kits makes this harness here, the BHA 2002. Metra makes it also, it's the same model number. And there's actually like 3 or 4 harnesses that are identical to this. The reason why I picked this one is because it has extra wires. And we're gonna need a couple extra wires, because if you think about it, we're gonna need at least 6 wires in this. 2 for the rear, 2 for the front door, and 2 for the dash. Even though we're doing a 5-channel amplifier, it's gonna be real easy to sum those wires in at the amplifier. And this one has a ton of extra wiring on it in order for us to do that. But these wires don't line up at all. We need to get these wires out of here, and we're gonna build our harness. This is a lot of fun. Now you guys ask me, hey, where do I get this harness? None of these plug in, all right? None of them do. As far as like straight up get going and rocking on. The first step in making this harness work is removing these 2 darker gray pieces. Flathead screwdriver will pop these out. Keep in mind, you don't have to pull these out if you don't want to. Color means nothing. You could just simply pull out some of these, fill in all these holes, and make it any way you want. You don't have to go like white for this, green for that, gray for that. You don't have to make it that hard if you don't want to. There's little tiny notches on the inside of this, and this little tiny GM extraction tool will allow us to get it out. This is on DNF tool drawer. Stick it into this hole, you're gonna push down a little tab, and then the wire will come out. It sounds really simple. Sometimes it can be a total pain in the butt. When the wire is out, there's a little tiny tab inside of there that needs to be pushed back up into place in order for this to lock back in. Same tool, push up on it, and you're all set. I'm gonna repeat the process on all these, get them all out. I'll meet you back in the car and we'll repin this harness. To make our harness, we're going to use some tools. The Mobile Solutions PT9A Plus makes our job a little bit easier. However, you might not have that tool. I totally understand. If you don't, and you can do this with a digital multimeter, but what you're going to have to do is, it's going to be a little bit harder. Take the door panels off, get to the speaker locations in the car. Polarity pop the speakers. use a 9-volt battery and what you think is positive, what you think is negative. The speaker moves up, that's your positive. Look where your 9-volt battery is, write down that color. Then take your digital multimeter, set it to continuity, take the one end, the red end, put it at the speaker, take the black end, come back to here, and check the wiring. When you hear the beep, then you know that's the right wire. You can put your pin in the harness and do it that way. The way the PT9A Plus works is that the speakers stay in the car, because we might not be changing them, and it's gonna create a popping sound that we can then take a second PT9A Plus and go off to that speaker and read what it says. Turn the unit on, have it set for signal line and output. I take 2 of the leads that I'm going to be putting in the harness, typically the last 2, and attach them to my meter. Don't try to jam something into these things, they're kind of small. We'll get a popping noise like this. Turn my second unit on, set for the same settings. It's gonna make a blinking like that. Go to my speaker, lights up green. That means I have these wires in the right configuration for this harness. Make sure you take the harness and line it up the right direction. And this is the passenger front. That is gonna be my gray leads. Positive is on top, negative is on the bottom. Make sure I get the 2 in correctly. Now don't assume that the next set of speakers are gonna be in the same direction. I mean, like top is positive, ground is negative to match. Sometimes they are, a lot of times they are. There's always that one that's backwards for some weird reason. They love doing that, and that can just screw up your day for sure. Next set, popping noise coming from the other side, but thankfully the outside air compressor from the building next door just turned on. I'm gonna walk over and check it. Fortunately for us, this one actually goes in the same direction. Now we know from earlier testing the next one is the driver's side dash. That one is also wired in the same configuration. For that, I'm gonna use those extra wires that we were talking about. We have an extra yellow and black, the power. I'm gonna use those for that speaker, and then on this side, we have an orange and an orange with a white stripe. I'm gonna use that for this side. This is my side dash. So far, so good. All of them are popping in the direction we would hope. They're all going in the same place. That's this guy here. It's gonna be the purples. My last set of speaker wires. I'll go check those just to make sure. And with that, we have our new harness. On the outside here, this little clip here in the front here where this clip is positive, and the back here with the clip isn't is negative. Passenger front bottom, driver's front bottom, driver's front top, passenger front top, passenger rear, driver's. So for those of you who wanna make this one on your own, there you go. Put the dark gray clips back on. This will lock these in place. And we now have a wiring harness that will plug right into our factory amp. Check your pins and make sure they're all level before you try to plug it in. I like to just go back through it one more time, just making noise out of each one to make sure nothing weird happened and that the things sat in where they're supposed to. Sometimes like a plug will bend or it'll get popped out or whatever you think. And just like that is magic, we have our bypass harness. Cool. The cool thing about it is like this will actually all fold back out like the factory carpet will, so if I didn't want to go here, I don't have to. I could lengthen all these and put it on that side. I still might, I'm not sure yet. It seems like it might be a better idea to put it under that side because of the power wire and what, I don't know yet. So we're gonna keep that one open. We'll kind of figure that one out as we go.
To remove the speaker grill on the dash, grab your pry tool, preferably metal, but be careful. And I like to have a second one. Second one is plastic. You just go around the speaker grill. And this one has a rubber lock. It's 7 millimeters. Carefully pull the speaker out, unplug it.
This little guy here is our dash speaker. Yay! Let's take a look at what's going to replace this and we'll compare it to it. The Kenwood KFC XP 6902Cs. They also make a 3C if you have something bigger than this. There's a couple really nice things about these speakers if you hadn't had a chance to check them out yet. and that is these really big brackets here in the top. This is a universal bracket. You break each one of these tabs off. It can fit a GM, it can fit a Dodge, it can fit a Toyota. Apparently it can fit a Nissan, maybe. I don't know yet. We'll get that off and check. Comes with some foam, so you can do like a kind of fast ring thing here with these. Inside is a ton of pieces. These little guys here are what we're going to be using for our dash. As you can see, they fit. These brackets are designed to either be cut or sanded down into place to fit into a car. It has standard connections here on the back. These guys up here in the front are the passive crossovers for them. There are two. There's also on the left and right more foam. There's lots of foam. Here's even more foam. There's foam to foam the foam. That is so that you have foam for the back of the speaker, foam for the back of the bracket, foam for the back of the mid-range, foam for the front of the mid-range. Whatever you need, there's a piece of foam for. There's even more foam here. There's a bag of screws. There's some speaker pigtails. The 6x9" mid bass, and another spacer, because you can never have enough of them. On the back of the speaker, it has this connection here where it says bypass and low pass. If you're hooking this up in, let's say, a Chrysler or a GM that have a premium audio system where there is a factory amplifier, or this one that has a factory amplifier, you're going to use the bypass connections if you're keeping the factory amplifier. If you're doing a full DSP, where the DSP is going to be handling the frequencies that go specifically just to this mid-range, meaning it's going to be a full active system, put it on bypass. If you're going to be integrating into, let's say, a standard 5-channel amplifier or a radio or something like that, where it does not have those capabilities, then make sure you use low pass. This will provide the crossover for this so that it does not interfere with the frequencies that the mid-range are making. You will still need to put a high pass crossover on it to prevent it from playing deep bass like 80 hertz. Just keep that in mind. We get a ton of questions about how this is supposed to be used. On the back of this speaker shows a negative and it shows a positive, and it has this cool piece coming off here, which is spectacular because we can remove these two wires from here and attach them to the crossovers for this so that we can easily plug them back into the dash. Remove the screw, they glue these on, and they also glue this inside of here. Now if we need to, we can resolder this back on. I like to take a small speaker like this and set it on top of the speaker I'm going to replace it with, just to get an idea of how well it's going to fit. In this case, there is a certain portion of it that has to be removed. I like to use a Sharpie to kind of direct what needs to be modified on this, and that is that guy right there. The same sander I used to do the radio, I'll use to do these, and then I'll use something like this guy here to make these holes in a little bit deeper. Before I cut these off, I need to test fit it in the dash to make sure that they even need to be cut off. In some cases they don't, it's just the way the speaker was designed. But I do know that I need to router these out to make room for the screws, even if I don't need to remove these. From the looks of it, you can see the silver there is where the factory one ends. This speaker is going to bolt into place. I don't need to trim any of these off. I did need to pull the clip out of this side and move it over to this side. That way it would be easier to add in these two screws as opposed to these two screws. This one is a pain in the butt to get to because it's right here in the corner of the dash. These two are far easier. I also have the terminals out towards the front here, because if you look in the dash, this is actually the hood. This is part of the engine compartment, and this isn't. There's a nice big open area here. Now that we know that, I don't have to do any more grinding on this. Awesome. Let's get the crossovers soldered together, and I'll get them off to Fernando so that he can get them into the car, and we can check one thing off of our list. Time to add some solder to this harness. There's a short red wire and a long black wire. We know the red is positive and the black is negative. On the Kenwood, the black with a white stripe is negative, the solid black is positive. According to the ends we have here, a little bit of solder, a little bit of shrink wrap. That gets this all set. I'm gonna pass this off to Fernando so that he can get some tape applied to this after this cools and get them into the car.
We tape our harness. Now it's ready to plug. This one you put the crossover to the left side. Grab your speaker. Small one is negative, big one is positive. Carefully so you don't scratch the windshield. And that's how simple you put a speaker in the dash.
Oh, he said simple. Wow. Okay. Disregard that simple.
Yeah.
This guy, I swear. With the dash speakers in, he can now move on to the bottom door speakers. Let's check that out.
To remove the door panel, I like to start in my window switch. You have to remove the handle clip first. Sometimes it's really hard to take it out, so I like to start with my door switch. Disconnect it. From behind, you cannot push the tabs. These plastic clips are very fragile, so sometimes when you come from the front, it breaks. Pull your handle, grab your pry tool, and just go around the plastic. Then we're gonna find a 10mm, second 10mm, and in the corner where the actual handle is, you gotta pry that up. Go slow and remove the 10mm behind it. Now we grab our pry tool and start pulling out. And I wiggle it up, and there's no cables attached, so you're good to go. To remove the speaker, 4 8mm, and clip it. Sometimes you're gonna find speakers that the magnet it's actually bigger than the normal, so you have to remove a little bit of the plastic behind it. But if you find that situation, remove the plastic bracket, 4 10mm. Now that you remove the 4 10mm, unclip the speaker harness, and now it's easy for you to cut it so you don't damage the window.
This is the factory 6x9, not all that exciting. And keep in mind, this is the premium, that means it's a 2 ohm. How exciting is that? Maybe it has a bigger magnet. It actually tells you the wattage on the back. 35 watts, 50 watts max, Rockford Fosgate. Clarion part number, ooh, pretty weird. This is gonna be our replacement. This is the bracket that we need to install it in. On this bracket, there are some little nipples that stick up that are for lining up the speaker. Flush cutters, trim those off. The next step is to see if our speaker will fit in here without any modification. A lot of the time 6x9s are kind of oversized and they will hit into this area here because there is a raised lip on this, and sometimes the magnets are too big and they'll hit the backside. That's why Fernando took this off, is so that we could check that here on the bench. And if we needed to do any trimming, it's far safer to do it here than to do it in the car. The nice thing is this is going to perfectly line up with these holes. There's nothing really getting in the way at all. Even the little clips here, this fits underneath. And this is the allure of this set of speakers from Kenwood, is that they are designed to fit in factory locations without modification. And they sound good. That's the plus there. In a door of a Dodge, these go right in with no problems. You don't have to space them out. You don't have to worry about him and the door handle. And all the other vehicles kind of works the same way. They put a Kenwood on top and bottom, so it really doesn't matter if it's like this or it's like that. So this one is gonna fit. That means we need to put some foam on the back of this to go between the two, and we have plenty of foam to do that. The bigger one actually comes with 4 strips of foam for front and back if needed, and it peels off, will easily go onto the back of this speaker. With the foam on the back, let's talk about the foam on the front. Let's take a look at the factory speaker. If you notice, it has no foam on the front like most factory speakers would do. Let's look at this. There's no foam on here. Very strange, right? Let's take a look at the back of the door panel. There's our foam right there. They foam the door panel itself. This sits in here just like that and will couple with that factory foam. That means, because we are keeping this factory mount, not modifying it in any way, our speaker will go in and connect with that foam, and we have no need to add any extra foam. What the factory has implemented will work just fine for what we're trying to do. That's kind of a cool thing. So before you get all excited about doing all this, make sure you check this out. In this case, because we're keeping everything factory, we don't have to modify it in any way. We're good. I'm gonna get these over to Fernando so that he can get these mounted back into the car. Fernando has informed me, right?
That is correct.
That the speaker is now mounted in place, screwed in. Use new screws.
I use new screws. Normally they are a little bit bigger than the regular screw, so I use an M5.
And what he means by that is sometimes the screws will tear into this area here, which can be bad. Could break this, knock it off, rip the surround. You don't want any of that to happen, so make sure you get the smaller head. The screws that it comes with are really nice for that, but Fernando is kind of bougie sometimes, and he likes what he likes.
Well, one of the things is like I don't like to use the factory screws is because it's an 8mm, and when you trying to grab, you bent. It doesn't fit right in. You put new screws and then you're gonna save some time.
He'll get that door panel back on, and that means once he's done with that, he'll move over to the other side, get that one done, and then we can check out the back speakers and see what's going on there. For the rear speakers, we're doing the KFC X174s. It's a 6.5-inch coaxial, and it looks something like this. Similar to the front speaker, it has a rubber surround, but this has a big silk soft foam tweeter, decent sized magnet on the back. These are 4 ohm, and it is going to be replacing this speaker right here. Now, unlike the front speaker, this is a totally different animal, meaning it doesn't have a driver that comes out of it, so that we can easily just set this inside of it and reuse this cool mounting structure that it has in order to not need bass strings or something like that. The good news is, because we're not using the foam on the front doors, we can use that foam on the back doors. Ta-da, that's pretty cool. To mount this in, we are going to need a bracket, and that bracket is the NSB 710. Basically 710 is what you really need to know there. Now, this is a universal Nissan bracket, and as you can see, it looks the same, bolts up the same. It does have these little tabs here, which are for different size speakers, 5 1/4 or whatnot, but as you can see, it kind of gets in the way of this thing mounting properly. To remove them, they just simply break off, and that frees all of that area up. Now, the other thing too, as you'll notice, is that they are a lot shallower than the factory ones. And that's a good thing, because we need to add this into here, which once we do that, you'll see how it gains that thickness that this speaker had. So they were kind of thinking about that when they designed this bracket, knowing that, you know, these are like 1/4 of an inch, we're gonna need some travel. But that'll also give us the room to put some foam around here, so it will couple with the door panel. The first thing we need to do is add some foam to both the front and back of this. We have a 1/16 inch foam that we like to use. Test fit it, make sure that the speaker covers all of the hole. Poke the holes in the foam so you know where to put your screw holes. Plug is there. And sometimes these brackets will actually have the hole in it for the wiring to come out. This one does not. That means we need to drill a small hole, line it up with the holes. Get it all tightened up. As you saw, don't do like this one all tight and then that, you know, kind of work your way around it. That'll keep the speaker nice and centered, and also keep it from what we call tacoing, where the speaker starts to bend. The thicker foam that was in the top of the 6x9 that we didn't need on the 6x9 because the speaker went in and we were able to use that factory bracket, we could now apply to the top of this speaker. And this is what we end up with for a rear speaker that can now go into the car. I'll get this off to Fernando so he can get the wires extended and get this screwed into place.
For the rear speakers, it's no different as far as removing the door panel as the front. Grab your pry tool. Disconnect your door switch. With your finger, start prying the bottom side. And this one, you definitely have to remove the clip from the tweeter. This one is attached to the door panel. Grab like a pick tool and you remove it. The speaker has the same thing, 3 10mm screws. To connect our speaker, we definitely need to extend our wires because the plug is on the bottom. So luckily we have the same colors in the primary wire that we use. So we use orange and blue. Didn't already test the polarity on our speakers, so we already know the blue it's our positive and oranges are negative. And we're gonna put our terminals. Make sure you line up all your screws. We are using the same screws to mount the bracket. And in this situation, we're not gonna use the factory tweeter, so we're gonna leave it unplugged, but we're gonna put a zip tie so it's not just flopping around. When you finish putting the door panel, sometimes the rubber on the side of the window, it gets caught up inside the door panel. So you grab your pry tool and slowly just push it up. Rear speakers is done.
It's been some time since I put this harness into the passenger floorboard here, and I've had a couple things to think about. One, power wire. Where's the battery in this? Fernando, can you pop the hood for me?
Yes, of course.
Let's take a look and find out, because that's kind of important. We don't want to drape this 4-gauge wire all over the car if we don't need to. Oddly enough, the battery is right here. Very appealing to go try to figure out how to go on the passenger side and mount the amp there. However, there's a grommet on the driver's side that has nothing in it. It's just a rubber grommet, which is that little guy right there next to the big grommet, which is kind of funny because they ran a wire through that big grommet like that little spot there is perfect. Getting through this passenger side is definitely going to be a struggle, according to Fernando, which I tend to agree with him. And there is a big factory grommet on this side, but it is located on the other side of the air conditioner. Sometimes the low-hanging fruit is the better move, especially when we'd have to go through a factory grommet that has existing wire in it. We tend to try to avoid that at all costs. We like to drill our own hole, mainly for service reasons. If you take it in and there's a big power wire like on this side that whoever put these lights in did, if something goes bad in the harness or whatever, it's easily blamed on you. So we don't do that. So I'm gonna agree with Fernando. I think the driver's side is the better way to go. We have this giant harness that goes across the top, which is easy enough for us to attach to. We have plenty of wire. We're using the Stinger kit, which has 18 feet of wire. I like that. That's what we're gonna do. That means I'm going to extract this harness that I just did. I'm going to lengthen it so that I can move it across, or move the top of the center console, the cup holders and stuff like that. They just unsnap. Another thing that we decided to do is do a bi-amp scenario, and we'll talk more about that once we get to the amplifier and why we're doing that. Just kind of keep that one floating in the back of your mind. We'll talk more about that. Prepping the factory dash can be, well, it can be fun and also a pain in the butt. A lot of cars nowadays are needing some form of a prep work, meaning pulling out pieces and repurposing things, because that's just the way the industry has gone, trying to replace a factory radio. Even something as old as this from 2015 needs a certain amount of work. On this particular radio, there is 4 Torx screws holding this metal bracket in that holds this radio. They are T20s. Anytime working on a dash, as much as you'd like to, don't use a cordless drill. And especially on a Nissan with this hard, brittle plastic, don't use a cordless drill. And that's it. We have the factory radio out. The dash kit is the Metra 997624. This is a multi-kit in that it will work a bunch of different Nissans. There's a pocket, which for some cases now you actually need. And then there's this bag here that has 2 trims. And depending on the factory dash bezel, you're going to need one or the other. And how you figure that out is just by the opening of the radio. Tuck this through, pull it up, and that's the one you're looking for. This is a smaller one for the non-video screened radios. As always, the owner's manual is your friend, and Metra makes some of the best owner's manuals out there. If you're trying to figure out how to get your dash apart, go to metraonline.com and look for the dash kit, look for the owner's manual, and they will give you some awesome instructions on how to get it out. I often refer to them when we're not using their dash kits because they do the best job. Now on the back pages it will tell you which car needs which one of these. I always like to test fit it just to make sure. But the tabs on the other hand, these things here, well, that's where I'm gonna find out which one of these I need. It looks like it might be bracket 3, which down here it says Frontier and Xterra, and that kind of looks like the factory brackets there. This guy. Let's find bracket 3. 3. Oh, there you go. That's them. The rest of these will not be used for this particular install. Now how this kit is designed to work is it has these little tabs here that you can see, and then they will attach into this like that, and then that's what's going to hold this into place. You're going to break off specific tabs that we don't need, which is going to be like this whole bottom area here and this piece, and that is to match up to these brackets. Now what I like about this particular kit with this particular radio is a big floating screen, and this kit actually, as we saw when I put it in here, locks into place with the whole dash kit, which is awesome because that big floating screen, we don't want it to wiggle around in the dash. To remove all of these pieces here, this is the tool of choice here. Standard cutoff / sanding disc does an amazing job. Just go at it, get it nice and sanded up. All cleaned up, looking spiffy. Slides in just like that, and that makes our kit. Let's grab the big brain box out of this and get that all mounted into place. If you've never seen what one of these giant floating screen radios look like and all the pieces, we do have a full video of this particular one, but we'll give you a quick overview of it. The first thing you're going to find, and this is the most important piece right here, this guy for this particular Kenwood. If you do not install this piece, your radio will not turn on. It won't. It's just this little tab here, sticks down, hits a micro switch, allows the radio to work. It's a safety feature that Kenwood has put in it. 2 little screws go on the top here to lock it in. I'm going to put it back in this red bag so that it will be easy enough to find in this nice red bag. There are also this red bag which has 2 extensions on it if you need to move the radio further out of the dash. These are beauty pieces, screws, and the metal brackets needed to use these extension covers. GPS antenna, 1 USB extension cable. This only has 1 USB, that's it, because it's wireless, Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so they only give you one because of that. The wireless mic, the main wiring harness, a bag of screws. This bag of screws is actually for the box we're getting ready to install, the back piece. So we'll set these over here. An owner's guide instruction manual. Inside of it there's 2 packages of foam. This guy here is the screen. We'll take a look at that in a minute, but this one is the one we want. I like to keep everything in the box until I need it later. Perfect world, I could just screw this into that kit and rock and roll. It's not a perfect world and I can't do that right yet. Because on the back of this radio it has these giant pigtails hanging off, which is cool, but I don't like them hanging like this because I don't like how safe that is not. Meaning by that is sometimes these things can get caught in the dash when they're solo like this, and it can cause problems for us at a later date. The other thing too that is, I don't know why this has just become like, this is what we do, is they put these little paper flags on here. They're paper. And that means that if at some point later on in the life cycle of this radio, you take the dash out, these could fall off. Sharpie marker, I like to put an R for the reverse. A 3 because this has 3 camera option and this is the 3rd camera. An F for front, which is also the dash cam. So if you do a front camera and a dash cam, then the 3rd becomes your front cam. A V out and a V in, so VI and VO. And now if those little pieces of paper fall off, at least we have some reference in which to go by. I take my V in and V out and I like to put those into their own bundle. If I'm going to be doing some sort of video, these will need to go off by themselves anyway, so it just makes sense to do it now. Flush cut the zip ties off. You can use any bundling method you want. I'm just using basic zip ties. And then all the cameras go into their own little bundle. With that done, now I can get this into the dash kit. Grabbing the bag of screws that came with the radio. These are fine thread M5 screws. There's 6 screws that come in the bag in order to attach this. Make sure that you have all the gapping correct before tightening them up as you go. For this giant piece here goes on the bottom. Bring back in the dash panel. Set this upside down inside of here. I'm gonna add a couple of rolls of tape underneath it to lift it up some so that it will sit flush. And with the same screwdriver, reinstall your radio. This kit has some rather large gaps here on the bracket that they use. A washer is a pretty good idea to use that to fill in that gap so that the screw sits on there properly. All right, we have it mounted in place. And for this, I'm checking to make sure, like I'm grabbing this and wiggling it to make sure that that is firmly and it's not gonna rock around, because it kind of sucks when it does. The big screen, it's easy to bounce. One of the things I'm super excited about is because it is this kit, we can now apply the screen to it. A lot of the times when you're putting these big floating screen radios in, the screen is the last thing to go on it, and it's like, oh, it's this whole big deal. But I can actually put this on it here on the bench, which I much prefer to do. So that means I have to get this last piece of foam out of the box. So these radios come with this cool piece over the top of it. It's kind of folded nicely in place. I just like to peel it back and make sure the screen has no scratches or anything like that on it. And then I promptly put this back on so that there are no scratches or anything like that. It also has some plastic around it, which is fine, it can stay on. We're gonna need this little bag here that has all of the extra screws in it. Slide this guy into place just like this. There's a bunch of screw holes here. There's a bunch of silver screws with blue Loctite on them. You need at least 4. 4 is a good number. 2, not so much, but 4 for sure. With those locked into place, it's time to grab that red bag again that has that cool black trim panel in it. It goes with this facing the screen, so it looks like this. This is gonna go towards the screen. There's a little groove that it digs into. Sometimes when putting this in after the fact, like if this was already in the car and this is tucked in there, getting that in can be a struggle. You gotta clip, you know, because this isn't like moving as much. Don't think that you can cut that off. Don't cut it off. They only give you 2 little black screws, so don't lose them. Magnetic tip for sure. This is what we end up with. It's kind of down low because you can't see the air conditioner. If this is sitting straight, it's still kind of out of the way, and we have plenty of room that we can go up. To do that, there's 4 screws on the side of the radio. Remove those and we can adjust the height. That looks a lot better. We have easy access for those switches. Put the screws back in. That's it. The white cover goes back over it until we need this to go into the car. Amplifier. Spot for the amplifier. What are we gonna do? Come up with this here, which, yeah, it looks like a bunch of chicken scratch and whatnot. For the most part, it's gonna use this factory screw mount here, this factory screw mount here. It's gonna come over to this area. Wiring is gonna go that, yeah, lots of things. First things first is let's get over to the saw and get this roughed out, and then we can come back in here and see how this is all gonna fit and make sure that, well, make sure I got it right. For the main bracket, we're gonna need a piece to start with that is 17 by 12. For this, I'm gonna be using 1/4 inch ABS. I have the table saw set up. I've taken the panel saw and ripped down a smaller piece so it's more manageable. And it's ABS. Strongly recommend wearing a face shield. This gets us the first piece. Now I need to transcribe these measurements onto this. I'm gonna do it on the back side, so that also adds some fun because I need to do it in reverse, so that when I flip it over, you don't see all the cool white lines that we're gonna draw on it. And this guy here is what we end up with. Little checks to make sure these are the ones you cut out. Now I'm gonna have some fun and remove these on the table saw. Ooh, yeah. This is it. This is what it looks like. I need to put a bend here, like a little L bend. I'll use the heat gun to do that. But this is all set and ready to go in there. Join me in the car and we'll take a look and see how I did. Put some bends into it. This guy right here. added a little bend to the front, we end up with a one-time custom fit ABS bracket. The amplifier is going to sit just like this. That'll give us plenty of room to run the wiring. I'll probably add some holes or something like that for the wiring to go through in the end. But for right now, that is all good. What I need to do is put the factory screws in, and then I'm gonna press down on this to mark the area where the factory screw goes, so that when it's time to, all I have to do is screw the thing in place. Of course, with that built, it's on to the fun part, which is actually doing the wiring. As you can see, it takes a minute or two to design the ABS bracket to mount that, but it'll be nice. It's out of the way, plenty of clearance between the seat. That subwoofer was really tall. Join me over on the bench and we will start the process of getting the amplifier mounted into place and also running all the wiring. Let's take a look at the amplifier we're going to be using for this, the XR901.5 Exelon 5-channel amplifier. This thing is a powerhouse. We've dynoed this thing. It puts out a ton of power. First up, you get a bag of screws, bag of Allen keys. They are extra long Allen keys. I kind of like using them. It comes with a bag of screws for the bass knob. There is a bass knob included in this, located right here. Standard phone cable, bass knob. And the amplifier itself comes in this cool padded envelope. With two sides to every amplifier, let's take a look at the dials on the side of this guy right here. First up, it has both high level and low level input. Min max on the input sensitivity is between 5 and 0.2 volts. A is front, B is back, C is sub. The reason why I say A and B kind of goes back to what we were talking about when we said we're going to do bi-amping. And depending on how I edited this, you may or may not know that already. But for this, channel A is going to be our dash speakers, those 2.5s. Channel B is going to be the 6x9s. And then we're going to be using the radio with its level control, crossover, and time alignment to power the rear 6.5s that are going to be going in. Has a subsection. Now this is the one oddity on this amplifier. The bass knob plugs in here and has to be wrapped around to the front. It's the only thing that plugs in on this side, which is the back side. You can see from the fan here. Bass boost between 0 and 18 dB. Low pass crossover 50 to 200 hertz. The A and B are also 50 to 200 hertz. That means we'll be running the crossovers that come with the 2.5s. Because this does not go up high enough for them actively, we will be setting it at 200 hertz to limit any other issues it may have. High pass filter on and off for both A and B. And then if we flip it over, right down here on the input side, there is one more switch that has to do with these RCA inputs here, which is for sub or A and B. That is if we were doing, let's say, high level input where we just have front, we just have rear. You're going to use an RCA to speaker wire adapter to do that. If you select A, B, the sub will be generated from these two inputs here and give you a non-fade subwoofer output. 4-gauge power and ground, and then everything else is a 12-gauge input, including your remote turn on. On the top of the amplifier, it has these two Allen screws here. Those need to be removed. That will access the screws to tighten down the terminals through here. A is up first, followed by B, and then your sub portion. You can bridge this if you'd like to, so if you want to use it as a really powerful 3-channel amplifier, you can do that. Left positive, right negative will allow you to achieve those goals. It has 340 amp fuses located here, and it's a pretty compact size for what we're going to be using this for and the amount of power it has. Removing the top plate, setting it aside. Always put your screws back in when you're done removing a top plate if they are going to be loose, so you don't lose them. As we all know, nothing sucks worse than getting to the end of this project and having to find the screws. Might be a day, could be a week, you never know. And this is also why I like using these, because as you can see how long this thing is, it goes down in there rather far. It is time to start wiring up the amplifier. I have two things I want to get done right away, and that is installing the bass control wire, and that plugs back here in the back. I'm going to zip tie it up and have it come this way along here. And then the speaker wires, which I've already twisted up some. I have a white, black, and a gray black, which are going to be my 6x9s. Then I have a white orange and a gray orange are going to be my 2.5s in the dash. I've put ferrules on the ends of the wire, and as far as routing goes, my plan is to have them come out and move along this way. The speaker wires and the RCAs are going to come through here. The power wire is going to turn and then immediately go down through the amp rack, because where I need them to come is through this area, but in the car itself. To do that, left is going to be the white with orange. White is my positive. Slide it into place, screw it down, and then gray with orange is gonna be my passenger side. Gray will be positive. Follow it up with B, white and black. White will be my positive, and then gray will be positive, black will be negative for the last speaker in this. For creating the holes for our zip ties, we have our wire ruler that you can get on mobilesolutionsusa.com. We make it, we put on here the size drill bits you should be using. For this, we're gonna be using a 9/64 because we're gonna be using some 4-inch zip ties. I'm gonna tuck this up against the amplifier as tight as I can. I will pre-make my holes. I don't need to go all the way through, I just need to mark them. And I'll come back a tad and make a group of secondary holes. And with those marked, now I can go through and do the whole thing. If you're up against the amplifier like this and you're worried that you might scratch it, put some blue tape on there, put your hand there, do whatever you can to avoid that from happening. The next step is to tuck these wires all up in here like this. I'm gonna repeat the same process for my bass knob. Right now the speaker wire is just kind of not finished. It's up and good there, but the bass knob comes all along here, makes a little jog, comes out, and that is all set. The reason why I didn't want to finish this yet is because of the RCAs. I need to get those into place. For that, we're going to be using some 6-footers. These are the Stinger 4000s, and what we like to do is put some shrink wrap on the ends of them to tell us what is what. In this case, with a white and gray, this is telling us that this is the front, and we will take this shrink wrap. These are about a 1 1/4 piece. You have your red and you have your clear. Slide it over, shrink it down into place, and repeat the process on the gray. Once those cool down, we'll plug them in. They're really hot right now. I don't want to burn my fingers. The sub wire doesn't get any shrink wrap. That's the one constant that we do. Also on the 4000s, they have a connect to source. That has to do with the drain wire that's inside of these for noise. A lot of people go, twisted pair, it's directional. Usually that's only if there's a drain wire. Sub plugs in like so, and then the rear, and then the sub. Okay, let's take a minute and think about this, because how we're going to be hooking this up is actually, this is just going to be powering front. However, they do not have a switch that feeds A into B. I could put Y connectors here and just run one RCA, which is fine, or I could put Y connectors behind the head unit. I'm going to put them behind the head unit. I like doing it there. To me, it's a much better place to put it, and that way I'll just run here and here. A couple reasons for that. If for some reason we decide we want to change it and go front rear for whatever reason, I'll be able to do that. If one of the RCAs goes bad, which there's like a 1% within 1% chance of that happening. But either way, it's just the way I like to do it. And I will cover these in the green and purple of the rear, just like I've done here, to mark which one is what. That way in my brain, I'll know exactly what RCA goes to what connection point. Now that the white is cooled, and get that put in. There's a natural twist to an RCA. A lot of people just don't think about silly stuff like this. When plugging these RCAs in, kind of straighten those out and make sure that you have that twist right. It will make zip tying them into place or zip tying into a bundle or however you do it way easier. With the RCAs in place, I can now finish off getting the speaker wire run and everything coming off to this side. I'm also going to tape up both of these independently so that they can look factory and go up into the dash where they need to go. I also need to bring my remote turn on over along here into this, because that as well is going to be going up into the dash. I'll be running that with the RCAs though, because the speaker wires are going to be running up underneath the passenger seat. Get my holes lined up. I will be running them in parallel to the bass knob right here, so I'm going to have them come over and turn just a little bit and line up. I want to keep everything as far to this side as possible. RCAs are zip tied in place. Speaker wire is elbowed over and in place. Both of them have been covered. Remote turn on, as I said, runs into this wire here, comes out the other end, and it has our cool blue shrink wrap on it so that it can go into the harness that we have yet to make for the radio. Our speaker wire is the same. This will run underneath the passenger seat where we will attach it to the harness we built. The next thing I need to do on this before I get to power and ground is the subwoofer wire, and I have made that up. I have added some Tech Flex to 12 gauge, and the other end is also made up with some 5-star heat shrink and shrink wrap as well, red and black. I like to use 12 gauge primary wire as the 12 gauge speaker wire, mainly because it's way more flexible inside of this tubing. Gives me a better run, and seeing how this has to go all the way through the car, that's kind of what we're looking for. This is going to come from underneath here because it has to run to the same place that the power wire does. Red goes there, black goes there. Push those into place and tighten them down. I would like to make one zip tie here to hold it in place. And that gets us almost close enough to where I can feel, ooh, we're almost done. I need a ground to come out, I need a power to come out. I need to drill 2 holes for those to go through. That gets me my 2 holes. Next, I need to grab them out of the kit and put some flex loom on them. The joys of getting towards the end of wiring this up is that there's a ton of crap on your workbench and it's frustrating. But we're almost there, which is nice because then I'll be able to put all this stuff away. And it just kind of accumulates. And as you're moving through it, it just seems like, yeah, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And the next thing you know, you just have piles of tools everywhere. It's just one of those things that, yeah, it's always been that way. Ground wire is covered in Tech Flex. The power wire is covered in Tech Flex. Bring it up through the hole here in the bottom, over into place. Tighten that down, and we have our first wire. Power wire comes in. Tighten that down. That means all our wires are now where we need them to be. There's no more wires to screw in. There's no more wires to screw in. The trim can go back on. And this can now get into the car. So join me in the car, we'll start running our wires. Fernando took out the factory grommet and replaced that with our own grommet. We didn't have to drill anything, it just snapped right into place for our 4 gauge. And now it is time to get the amplifier into place. These wires are gonna go off that way, and the rest of these wires are gonna come in through here like you see. But the first thing I need to take care of is the ground. And if I pull this guy up here, and you look at that area right there, you can see there is a nice factory ground point located right there. So I've shortened this wire up, and I'll be installing that ground into that spot. And then once that is in place, I can start running the rest of these wires to where they go. This is the sub wire, which will go back that way, and this is the power wire, which will go up that way. Front bolt, the other bolt for the factory is back here, mounted in place. The wiring comes up here into the center console. I need to jump over on the other side and get the wiring for that plug attached. Fernando mounted the base knob right here, so that just needs to get plugged in. This is our RCA that needs to go up into the dash, but before I do that, I need to go over there and connect the rear speaker wires up to that plug, so I want to do it all in one shot. Fernando's going to be dealing with a fuse holder. As soon as he's done with that, we'll take a look at it. For the most part, I can fold this seat down into place now. Yeah, it's nice and firm. Gotta love it. I guess I need to go to that side of the car. Everything is soldered into place. We have the rears, we have the fronts. I'm gonna add some tape to this joint, and then I'll zip tie up into here and run it up into the dash. Underneath the seat, like I showed earlier, the carpet is all still here. It just kind of folds under from the factory. So I can hide this harness and you'll never even know. Like, you can use this to store, you know, whatever, French fries, you know, extra change. It'll all fit in there nice and cozy, and you won't even know there was a factory amplifier under there. It's pretty cool. All right, wire comes out of the hole. We put the 3M strict cock on the inside and the outside, and of course there's the plastic grommet in there. Comes along the master harness in the car, all zip tied in place. Fernando built his standard S-style bracket. This one I like. It's simple, it is effective. It attaches to the factory bolt. Our fuse holders just snap off, so he can easily get to the battery and replace it without having to worry about all of this and disconnecting it and moving it out of the way. And that's it. Good job, Fernando.
Yay.
It is time to wire up the harness. I have my laptop. I have the RRs, which is what we're using. This is just the regular RR. We're gonna need the HR, which stands for harness ready, NI1. You don't have to have the harness ready. The only thing why this is more convenient is that it allows me to plug in this, which is the Ken one. There's a Pioneer, there's a Sony, there's an Alpine, and these just plug into one another, and it saves time. I don't have to use this harness here to connect to this. It just streamlines the whole process. I also need an antenna adapter, which is the NI6. In the RR, I'm just gonna need the data harness. As far as that information goes, when you flash the module, it will take you to this page here. And on this page, this is for the Xterra. It shows us we have to hook up certain things, but then there's all these harnesses across the bottom that we don't have to hook up. This is the most important thing. We get these guys that'll bring these in and they're like, oh, I don't know why it doesn't work. And it's like, they have all these extra connectors plugged in, connection. They didn't look at the instructions. What are the odds? So it's showing us right here that this data connection is all we need, which is this one cable here. And then there'll be 3 other harnesses plugged into the brain. The OBD2 needs to get connected, but only it's going to be connected to the black connector. The white one will not be connected. White, yellow, blue over here will not be connected. Bluetooth module underneath passenger seat. We know it's not underneath the passenger seat, so we're not going to worry about that. There's a green harness here and a white harness here that need to be connected. And then of course, either plugging it in or hardwiring it, whichever one works for us. And because we have the Ken 1, we don't have to worry about it. For me, I want to get all the harnesses that I don't need out of the way. So I will need the OBD2, set that aside. I won't need my main harness, set that aside. I don't need C, I don't need A, I don't need B. I don't need the 2 connectors with the RCAs on them because we're not retaining that Rockford system. This is the D, which is the Bluetooth harness, which it does show it on its need. I'm gonna set this aside because there still may be that module somewhere in here that this will need to plug into. We just know it's not underneath the passenger seat. And I won't need the audio cable for the RR, that in the box. So those are all going to the side. According to the instructions, we don't need this white cable here. And there's only like 4 or 5 pieces of tape on here, so it's easy enough for us to remove this and we can get that white cable out of this, and then we'll retape this. That way it can run over to the OBD2 and zip tie into place with the rest of the wiring. It won't look out of place with just this brown and red wire. Pin extraction tool that we used earlier in this install. Same basic idea. We'll get this out of here. And we just need that black connector right there. Fernando's anxious to wire this in, so I'll pass this off to him and he can tape it up for me. There you go, buddy. And that gets us over to this, which is the main harness. Plug in my data connection, grabbing our main harness. So the convenience of this is that I can easily now just do this, plug this into the radio, the car, the RR. Everything is done. It has the minimal amount of tape on as needed. It uses this new V style connection so that this brain can be tucked over here, the radio can be over there, and it's a pretty sweet deal. It has the connections here if I was going to be using the RCAs or not, or I could just cut these and hardwire them into the amplifier if need be. So it's a pretty solid piece. I like what they've done. It has the connections here for using their CMOS camera that does the different view angles, power antenna output, so we can plug that into this guy here. It's a pretty well thought out piece. Ground wire coming off the end. I am going to modify this just a little bit. There are a couple things that this doesn't have that I wish it did. One is there's no external power connection if I'm going to be doing a dash cam or backup camera, as well as the remote turn on is way down here over by the factory radio plug. I'm not really feeling that. That means I'm going to take it apart and do a little bit of changing to this, and that's going to take some time. So with the blink of an eye and a snap of a finger, and this is what it looks like once it's retaped up. Kept the same V shape, added in my accessory wiring, so I have an accessory, a constant 12 volts of ground, and my remote turn on over here instead of down at this piece here. Plug is all taped up, added in the antenna adapter, OBD2 port is over here. Now here is the one thing that has kind of got me perplexed. According to the instructions, it shows the backup camera coming off of the main harness and plugging in. As we know, it told us we didn't need any of these. D, which it shows us we need for the Bluetooth, which we still don't know where that is or if we need it or not. We'll find out in a minute. There's nothing to plug this into, which is kind of odd. Most of the time these instructions are spot on. In the car it has the C harness, so I'm wondering if it was just a typo and they didn't include this as needed. That means we got to get this into the car and figure that out. It does need to be grounded, so we do have to screw this into a ground. Let's hop over into the car and we'll do a little bit of troubleshooting and find out if that's what we need. If it's what we need, it's no big deal, it's super simple. On the end here it has this blue connector. The blue connector is the camera power, which is located on this blue connector. There's also this white connector, which is data, which may or may not be needed, I don't know. But that is the one easy thing that this just works that way. Let's get into the car. These are the 2 wiring harnesses in the dash that I've been talking about. The main wiring harness here, and then one that looks very similar to it is over here. This was the C harness. Plugged right in, test fitted it before. Backup camera comes off. And yeah, this is the harness that we need to actually retain the backup camera. The cool thing about the Kenwood is if you just plug it in, you don't have to go through the whole setup. You can just go to the camera settings and tap on it and it'll give you an image of whichever camera you're looking at. Did that real quick just to verify. Weird. I'll give him a call, let him know. That means now we can finish attaching our harness into the car, because all I did was hook up those two harnesses really quick. The rear speaker wires we soldered into that connector that iData gave us. Plugs in. OBD2 is plugged in already. Remote turn on that comes in with the RCAs can go into the remote turn on here. He doesn't have the dash cam or a front cam or anything like that right now. We just like to pre-wire that so that they're there if we need them and I don't have to open this harness back up. USB is plugged in to the factory USB adapter. This used a GM USB, I think from PAC, but everybody makes one. You can get it from iData as well. Antenna adapter is here and is now connected. We still have the light for the airbag in the car. We'll do that last, once we make sure we have all these connections made, which I think we do. So now it's time to unplug this, mount this back into the kit. We'll come back in and start plugging in everything. I also grounded the harness because I said I had that ground wire. I grounded it here to this big frame rail in the back. All right, here we go. Here's the big dog. When plugging in harnesses, go from the longest harness to the shortest harness. It'll just make things easier so you're not tripping over harnesses and getting stuff in the way. And also try to keep things untangled. It's easy to get stuff tangled up when dealing with tons of wiring like this. When plugging in a Kenwood radio, on the back of the radio, it does not go front, rear, sub, it goes rear, front, sub. And since we're talking about the colored RCAs and position in the back of the radio, we need to add in our Y adapters to this because we are not doing front, rear, and sub, as recalled, we're doing bi-amp. That means we're going to need white and green, 4 pieces of heat shrink, and a Y adapter that already has a white tip on the end of it. That will plug in. A pet peeve of mine, when people put tape over these RCAs. You know who you are, and I know why you do it. And all I can do is say, please, please, please stop doing it. Tape is disgusting when over these RCAs. And eventually, yes, they will have to be pulled apart. It happens. Heat shrink, yes, it's gonna have to be destroyed to pull it off, but you know what, so is tape. The difference is the heat shrink is not gonna leave a sticky mess all over it. Gray and purple are gonna go together. And the only reason why I'm doing this, it's not so that they don't pull apart, because they're not gonna pull apart. It's because of the metal in the dash. When we're putting this back in there, I don't want this joint to accidentally touch some metal. That could give us the potential for noise or something like that that we don't want. There we go, we have nice 4 connections. They go right in the middle here. Yay. Looks like all our wiring for the radio is connected, so that just means we have the factory connection to do the airbag, the air conditioner to connect. If we go back to the beginning of the video, if you remember when we first took this radio out and removed that piece of plastic, now you know why. Because there's so much that has to go into this dash that just gets in the way of. Before we snap this in place, we want to test everything to make sure it works. You can just snap in one corner like this. We'll leave the rest of it disconnected. Use the stress factor. You don't want it to like get to the very end and then it breaks. Still have the cover over the top of it. At this point, it's time to do a little testing, specifically steering wheel controls. We need to see if those guys work. Key in. We also need to test the USB, make sure that that works as well. I'm gonna grab my phone because some of the buttons we need to test for the radio are phone buttons. Turn demo off. When I was talking about testing the camera, hit camera, go to camera assignment settings, pick rear camera, and you can see that rear camera pop up. I can do that without digging into the whole radio. Make sure to turn your demo off. Select finish. We have the iPhone plugged in. You guys know the drill. Press and hold. Ooh, what's the weather like today?
Looks like it will be partly cloudy today. Daytime temperatures will hover around 81 degrees, with overnight lows around...
So if we can get that one phone feature to work, we know all the other buttons are gonna work. That's just how the Nissans are, which is really cool. Put it back onto the source, radio. We got volume up and down. Our steering wheel controls are doing what they're supposed to do. That is spectacular. Reverse is working. Ooh, and you see that little, there's a, I don't know if you guys This has dynamic lines. You can see there's a little orange line here that's moving. That's really awesome. Put it back in park. So we have CarPlay working, we have the buttons working, the backup camera, reverse trigger works. I knew the camera didn't. USB is working. Fernando, what am I missing? Exactly. Can't think of it. We have some buttoning up that we need to do. Seats need to get screwed down and stuff like that. Clips need to go into place. This seat over here on the driver's side isn't attached yet because we need to do the final listen to. Now the really cool thing about this radio is that it has the most advanced Kenwood EQ or DSP, call it what you like, inside of it. And we're gonna walk through that and set this car up so that it sounds amazing. We went through the process of doing an active front stage. We wanna make sure that we've optimized this sound for its best potential. We'll get all these steering wheel controllers and seat covers off. We'll hop in the driver's seat and we'll walk you through the process of setting that up right now. The first thing that we want to do when we get into the car is check our balance and fader. When you get to the big audio page, it's going to be your third thing down where it says fade, balance, and zone. You can easily drag this across to all four corners to make sure it works and then tap center. It'll take you back into the center. The next thing you want to do is check your polarity. Make sure that all the little speakers are moving in the right direction. For that, we use the Sheffield Labs Polarity Pop Track. And then we use that same PT9A to check and make sure all the speakers are moving the right direction. You can also use some apps on your phone. Speaker Pop is one of them that will allow you to test for that. Once you've got those two things done, then that'll allow you to go in and set up the crossover and be successful at it. We like to make sure that we set up the speaker size, only because this is going off to a customer, and if you don't do that, they might go in and do it, and that could change your crossover points on those speakers. So front is 6x9, and as far as the tweeter goes, it's on dash, and this is going to be considered large because it's a 2.5 inch. Go to the rear, 6.5, lower door, he's getting a 12 inch. Go back to the front speakers. Now we can pick the crossover points for this. We're gonna put that at 80. The rear, 6.5, we'll put it at 100, and then the subwoofer is also going to be at 80. We're gonna leave it at 12 dB because this is just a standard front rear subsystem at the end of the day. We're not really blending speakers between the dash and the door in an active situation. Even though it is kind of active, it's not really that active in the sense like we're not using the DSP. With that set up, we can take a little listen and make sure that we have sound going and performing properly, like that the rear speakers aren't bottoming out or anything like that. One of the other secrets to doing a system like this where we're using an amplifier on the front and deck power on the rear is to actively turn the volume down on the rear speakers. It's 18 watts, but it's going to ramp up a lot quicker on the deck power than it is on the amplifier power. It's just different power curves because of that built-in little crappy amplifier. There's two places in a Kenwood deck where we can lower that. One is in the crossover point and the other one is in the time alignment. So we go into there and we can hit adjust and we go to level, and now we can turn these down -8 dB. We can also turn it down another 8 dB in the crossover settings. Keep in mind when doing it in the time alignment page, it is only relevant to the time alignment page you're on. What that means is, like right now, it's set for all. So we've reduced it in the all page. When we switch to the front left, it is going to go back up to the normal volume. So in this case, we go here, we hit adjust, and we hit level, and we can turn it down there as well. Now when they switch between the two, you're covered. We have sound in all the right places. We need to set up the time alignment. We have a trick for doing that, which is what we're gonna show you now. So in setting up time alignment, there's two different ways you can do it. One is to just go into time alignment or position, digital time alignment, and select front left. The Kenwood is really nice. It does a good job of automatically getting you really close. And if that's cool with you, stop there, move on, and you know, rock out. However, if you'd like to get it more precise, what we need to do is set everything to 0. And for that, we want to start at the front right, put that to 0 feet. Do the same for all the others. You can use a tape measure and you can measure from each speaker to ear. It's cool, takes some time. What we like to do is just go to the Polarity Pop Track by Sheffield Labs and fade to the front. And when you're sitting in the front seat here, it should sound like everything is coming out of this corner of the dash. When you add delay to the front right, you'll notice it's adding delay to the left. You keep adjusting that until the popping sound sounds like it's coming out of the center of the dash. Now keep your head facing forward. Everyone wants to kind of look a little towards the center. Don't. Eyes forward. Hands on the steering wheel if you like. Find a nice relaxed spot. Now if you lean into the armrest, make sure you lean into the armrest. Figure out where your position is. When you have it where you think is right, I go back and I play the next track, which is the
My voice
three
should
people.
appear
This one. And her voice should sound like it's coming out from behind your screen. If you got that right, you're golden. Go back into your balance and fader, fade it towards the rear. And now we're gonna do the same thing, we're just gonna do it for the rear speakers. You're gonna keep adjusting the passenger side until it sounds like it's in the middle, but behind you. Put it back in the center once you feel you have it where you need it. With all of them playing, you may need to go in and adjust level at this point. You can come in here and you can bring down or up any specific channel you want.
My voice.
Play the talkie part where she tells you where she or he is at, and if it's golden, you're great. You can easily switch back between all and front left to give you an idea of whether you've gotten it right or not. And that'll set up the soundstage for you and get it, you know, right on. After we've gotten that right, it's time to go in and look at the EQ. We want to get a baseline for the EQ to have some fun with it. The cool thing about this particular radio is it has this 13-band EQ right here that we can play with. And it's like, wow, this is fun. However, if we come down here into sound effects, over here in the bottom corner it says parametric EQ on and off. We turn that on, we select yes, and then we go into setup, and this gives us a whole brand new fun and exciting thing. It gives us a 9-band parametric EQ for the whole system, 2 bands for front, 2 bands for rear, and 1 band for sub. This allows us to go in and figure out the really annoying things with 2 bands and make some quick adjustments for them. To do that, we're going to use the U-Test mic and an iPad. We'll use the Educard Test and Tune app to generate some pink noise. When you get done, make sure you program a memory to do that. Hit memory, then the user. Don't press and hold it, you'll erase it. What I ended up doing here, one of the features I really like about this is middlers up in the dash. Middlers always will only play up so high. Middler stands for mid-tweeter, so they're kind of not good at either one, but they're okay. This has a high shelf. A high shelf allows us to grab a whole group of frequencies at one time. It kind of looks like a crossover, and we can raise those all up. And in this case, these speakers up in the dash, we added on front a high shelf, which is moving that whole area up on this so that it gives us a treble boost. As always, now we can play some music and see what we've done, if it makes sense. When you get done setting up the parametric EQ, if you still want to go in and use some of the presets that come on the 13-band EQ just to color the music and make it sound more fun, you can totally do that. Just keep in mind that every time you raise up, it's going to gain it up. You know, it's going to limit how loud you can play it. As long as you pay attention to that, you're golden. It's a radio. Have some fun with it. It's got a lot of buttons, so you can have a lot of fun, right?
That is correct.
That is correct. So this is the quick and easy way to make this sound good. Now, granted, yes, we use the U-Test mic to do that. You can use an I-Test mic. You could probably even use your phone in a basic RTA app to get really close using the parametric EQ. So this is something you can do. This is how we set up all our radios. It's quick, it's fast, and it's efficient. And we, you know, we get it where we want it, and the customers are, you know, yay! See, you sure gets that.
Yeah.
And for that, oh, you know, we forgot to show them the subwoofer. Oh my gosh, we almost ended the show without showing the subwoofer. Conveniently enough, I have a bass track loaded up. I'm gonna run to the back and play you some sub. We're gonna end the video with that. Fernando?
On to the next one, guys.
You guys have a great night as always. We'll see you later next time. Bye. Let's go listen to some bass.